An alien woman was bound and left for dead. After I saved her, she came back for me. The winter storm had been raging for 3 days when Devin Walsh picked up the strange signal on his emergency radio. As the lead ranger at Blackpine National Forest, he'd grown accustomed to all sorts of distress calls, but this one was different. Instead of words or static, a haunting melody pulsed through the speaker, rising and falling like a distant song. Devin checked his equipment again, marking his location on the tablet's GPS. The temperature outside his cabin had dropped to 15 below, and the wind howled through the ancient pines, carrying sheets of snow that reduced visibility to mere feet. Common sense told him to wait out the storm, but something about that signal tugged at him, an urgency he couldn't explain. He grabbed his emergency pack, thermal gear, and rescue equipment. If someone was out there in this weather, they wouldn't survive the night. The radio signal grew stronger as he trudged through knee-deep snow, following the increasing pulse of that otherworldly tone. His handheld detector led him deeper into the forest, where the trees grew so thick their branches intertwined overhead, creating shadowy tunnels through the white landscape. The signal peaked near an old ravine, and Devin's flashlight beam caught something that shouldn't have been there, a shimmer in the air, like heat waves rising from summer asphalt. But this was the dead of winter. As he approached, his radio crackled and died, and the hair on his arms stood on end despite the layers of insulation. That's when he saw her. She lay half-buried in the snow, her body emanating a faint purple glow that pulsed in rhythm with the signal he'd been following. Her features were almost human, but not quite. Her skin had a metallic sheen, and delicate patterns that looked like circuit boards traced across her face and hands. She wore what appeared to be armor, but it was unlike anything Devin had ever seen, flowing like liquid metal across her form. "Hello," Devin called out, approaching cautiously. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes snapped open, revealing irises that swirled with galaxies of silver and violet. She tried to move but couldn't. That's when Devin noticed the restraints. Nearly invisible filaments of energy wrapped around her limbs, anchoring her to the ground. They hummed with the same frequency as the signal that had led him here. "Please," she whispered, her voice carrying an echo that seemed to resonate inside his mind rather than through the air. "They're coming back, help me." Devin hesitated only for a moment. In his 15 years as a ranger, he'd rescued lost hikers, injured climbers, and even the occasional stranded researcher. But this was beyond anything in his training manual. Yet the fear in her eyes was unmistakably human, and that was enough. He pulled out his multi-tool and approached the restraints. As soon as the metal blade touched the energy filaments, they reacted, crackling with power. The alien woman spoke quickly, her words carrying images directly into his mind. "The crystal in my armor near the shoulder. Press it against the bonds." Devin found the crystal she mentioned, a small shard that pulsed with inner light. When he touched it to the restraints, they dissipated like smoke in the wind. The alien woman tried to stand but collapsed, her body temperature dangerously low even by human standards. "My name is Nyx," she managed to say as Devin wrapped her in his emergency thermal blanket. "The hunters, they tracked me here. Your world wasn't supposed to be involved." "I'm Devin," he replied, supporting her weight as they began the difficult journey back to his cabin. "And right now, all that matters is getting you somewhere warm and safe. We can figure out the rest later." The storm intensified around them, but Devin noticed something odd. The snowflakes seemed to bend around Nyx, as if repelled by an invisible force field. She drifted in and out of consciousness as they walked, mumbling in a language that made the air itself vibrate. Finally, they reached his cabin. As Devin helped Nyx inside, his security sensors went haywire, and every electronic device in the building flickered. He got her settled near the fireplace, watching in amazement as her armor slowly shifted, adapting to allow better heat absorption. "Why were you bound out there?" Devin asked, preparing a hot drink more out of habit than certainty that she could consume it. Nyx's galaxy-filled eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made his breath catch. "Because I discovered something I wasn't supposed to know, something about your world, your people, something that changes everything." She tried to say more but wavered, exhaustion overtaking her. As Devin watched her slip into what he hoped was healing sleep, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just changed irrevocably. Outside, the storm raged on, but now it felt like nature itself was trying to hide them from whatever hunters Nix had mentioned. He checked his weapons, reinforced the cabin's security system, and settled in for a long night, knowing that this was just the beginning of something much bigger than himself. Dawn broke over Blackpin Forest, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of rose and gold. Devin hadn't slept, spending the night alternating between watching over Nix and monitoring the cabin's perimeter. The storm had passed, leaving behind an eerie stillness that set his nerves on edge. Nix stirred near the fireplace, her metallic skin catching the morning light and refracting it in mesmerizing patterns across the cabin walls. Her armor had shifted during the night, becoming less rigid and more cloth-like. The circuit-like patterns on her skin glowed brighter as she regained consciousness. "The hunters," she said immediately, sitting up. "They'll be tracking the energy signature from my restraints. We need to move." Devin handed her a cup of water, which she examined curiously before drinking. "Who are these hunters? What do they want with you?" Nix's expression darkened, the swirling galaxies in her eyes turning stormy. "They're called the Sentinel Corps, elite trackers from my world, tasked with maintaining what they call cosmic order. But they're really just enforcers for those who want to keep their power." She stood, moving to the window with an otherworldly grace. "I was a researcher studying primitive worlds, but I found something here on Earth, evidence that humanity's potential far exceeds what my people believed. The Sentinels. They don't want this knowledge getting out." Devin joined her at the window, scanning the tree line. "Why would they care about human potential?" "Because," Nix turned to face him, "if humans realize what they're truly capable of, it would upset the balance of power in our sector of the galaxy. My people have positioned themselves as shepherds of developing worlds, but really, they're more like prison wardens." A distant howl echoed through the forest, but it wasn't any wolf or coyote Devin had ever heard. The sound had a metallic edge to it, like steel scraping against steel. Nix tensed, her armor automatically shifting back into its protective configuration. "They're here," she whispered. "They've brought search drones." Devin grabbed his rifle, more out of instinct than any belief it would be effective against alien hunters. "My snowmobile's in the shed. We could try to outrun them." Nix shook her head. "Their drones can track any powered vehicle, but—" She reached into a compartment in her armor and pulled out what looked like a small crystal sphere. "This might help us. It's a quantum field generator. It can mask our biological signatures." The alien device hummed to life in her palm, emanating waves of energy that made Devin's skin tingle. "We need to reach my emergency beacon," Nix continued. "I managed to hide it before they caught me. With it, I can contact allies who oppose the Sentinel's control." Another howl, closer this time. Through the windows, Devin caught glimpses of shadows moving between the trees, shapes that seemed to shift and change, never quite settling into recognizable forms. The temperature in the cabin dropped suddenly, frost crystallizing on the inside of the windows. "They're trying to flush us out," Nix explained, her voice tight with tension. "The Sentinels can manipulate thermal energy. They'll freeze everything around us until we have no choice but to run." Devin quickly packed essential supplies, food, medical kit, extra ammunition. "How far to your beacon?" "About 10 miles north near the old fire watchtower, but we'll have to move carefully. The Sentinels can detect rapid movement." Ice was creeping up the cabin walls now, and their breath came out in thick white clouds. Devin pulled on his cold weather gear while Nix's armor adapted, generating its own heat field. "Listen," she said urgently, gripping his arm. "You don't have to come with me. The Sentinels might spare you if you're not involved." Devin checked his GPS and survival gear one last time. "I've spent my life protecting this forest and the people in it. I'm not stopping now just because the threats have gotten more exotic." A small smile curved Nix's lips, and the patterns on her skin pulsed brighter for a moment. "Your species' capacity for courage still surprises me. But you should know, if we succeed, if we expose the truth, Earth will never be the same." Your people will have to face the reality that you're not alone in the universe, and not everyone out there is friendly. Maybe it's time we grew up as a species, Devin replied, securing his pack. Ready. Nix activated the quantum field generator, and a subtle distortion surrounded them both. Stay close to me, she whispered. The field only extends about 3 feet. They slipped out the back door of the cabin just as the first drone appeared. A sleek, black object that moved like a cross between a bird and a snake, its surface seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. As they made their way into the forest, Devin heard more mechanical howls, and the temperature continued to drop. The hunt had begun, and the next few hours would determine not just their fate, but potentially the future of human civilization itself. The forest had become a maze of ice and shadow. Devin and Nix moved slowly through the frozen landscape, staying within the protective bubble of the quantum field generator. Every few minutes, another mechanical howl would pierce the air, sometimes near, sometimes far, making it impossible to tell how many hunters pursued them. We need to rest, Devin whispered after several hours of careful progress. His legs burned from trudging through deep snow, and even his advanced cold weather gear struggled against the unnatural chill the sentinels had brought to the forest. Nix nodded, guiding them toward a hollow beneath a massive fallen tree. The quantum field would help hide them, but they still kept their voices low. As they huddled in their shelter, Nix's armor shifted again, extending slightly to provide additional warmth to them both. You said you discovered something about human potential, Devin said, trying to distract himself from the cold. What did you find? Nix's galaxy eyes focused on him intently. Your DNA contains sequences we've never seen before, patterns that suggest incapacity for rapid evolution. But more than that. She reached into another compartment in her armor and withdrew what looked like a small star, floating just above her palm. This is a fragment of pure stellar energy, she explained. My people use it as a power source, but it requires special genetic markers to handle safely. When I tested it here on Earth, I discovered that roughly 30% of humans carry those same markers naturally. Devin stared at the floating star fragment, mesmerized by its gentle pulsing light. What does that mean? It means that humanity isn't just another developing species. You're something new, something with the potential to rival or even surpass my people's abilities. That's why the Sentinels want this knowledge suppressed. They're afraid. A drone passed overhead, its shadow briefly darkening their hiding spot. They held perfectly still until it moved on. Once it was gone, Nix held out the star fragment to Devin. Take it, she said softly. I can sense the markers in your DNA. You're one of the 30%. Hesitantly, Devin reached for the floating light. As his fingers touched it, warmth flooded through his body, and for a moment, he felt connected to something vast and incomprehensible, the very energy that powered the stars themselves. Focus, Nix instructed. Don't try to control it. Just let it flow through you like water finding its own path. As Devin concentrated, the star fragment's light spread up his arm in delicate patterns similar to the circuits on Nix's skin. His awareness expanded, and suddenly he could feel the forest around them in a way he never had before, every tree, every creature, even the hunters in the distance. The Sentinels use technology to manipulate thermal energy, Nix explained. But with this, you can do it naturally. It's part of your species' inherited potential. Devin closed his eyes, experimenting with this new sense. He could feel the artificial cold the Sentinels had created, and with careful concentration, he found he could push back against it, creating pockets of warmth. This is incredible, he breathed. But why would your people want to keep this from us? Power, Nix said simply. My civilization has ruled this sector of space for millennia by controlling access to stellar energy technology. The idea that humans might develop these abilities naturally threatens everything they've built. Another drone call echoed through the trees, closer this time. Nix tensed, her armor rippling. They're changing their search pattern. We need to move. As they prepared to leave their shelter, Devin felt a new confidence. The star fragment's energy had become a steady warmth in his chest, and he could sense the movements of the hunters more clearly now. "The beacon is still about 4 miles ahead," Nick said, checking a holographic display that emerged from her armor. "But the sentinels are closing in from 3 directions. They're trying to hurt us." Devon reached out with his new awareness, feeling the currents of heat and cold in the air. "There's a gap in their net to the northeast. They don't know these woods like I do. There's a series of narrow ravines there that could give us cover." Nick smiled, the starlight patterns in her eyes brightening. "Now you understand why they fear human potential. In just hours, you're already learning to use abilities that took my people generations to master." They emerged from their hiding place carefully, staying within the quantum field's protection. As they moved through the forest, Devon used his newfound power to maintain a bubble of warmth around them, counteracting the Sentinel's cold manipulation. But both of them knew that this gift of starlight was just the beginning. The real test would come when they finally faced the hunters, and that confrontation was drawing nearer with every step. The old fire watchtower loomed before them in the pre-dawn darkness, its metal frame encased in supernatural ice. Devon and Nix crouched behind a ridge, watching 3 sentinel drones patrol the area in precise patterns. "The beacon is at the top," Nix whispered, her armor shifting nervously. "But they're waiting for us. This was a trap." Devon extended his newfound senses, feeling the web of cold energy the sentinels had woven around the tower. The star fragment's power thrummed in his chest, showing him patterns he'd never imagined existed before. "There's something else," he murmured, "above us." The clouds parted, revealing 3 dark shapes hovering in the sky, ships that seemed to drink in the starlight, their surfaces rippling like liquid metal. As they watched, figures began descending from the vessels, their forms tall and angular, wearing armor that made Nix's look primitive by comparison. "Sentinel commanders," Nix breathed, fear evident in her voice. "They rarely leave their ships. They must consider us a significant threat." The quantum field generator sputtered and died, its energy depleted. Almost immediately, every drone in the area turned toward their position, and the Sentinel commanders raised their weapons, staffs that crackled with dark energy. "Run," Nix shouted, but it was too late. The air itself seemed to crystallize around them as the Sentinels unleashed their power. But Devon was ready. Drawing on the star fragment's energy, he pushed back against their cold, creating a sphere of warmth that shattered their attack. "Impossible," one of the commanders spoke, its voice like grinding ice. "The human has been given the starlight gift. This violation cannot stand." Nix's armor fully deployed, weapons emerging from hidden compartments. "Your time of keeping humanity in the dark is over. They deserve to know their true potential." "You sacrifice everything for these primitives," another commander demanded. "Your position, your future, your life." "I sacrifice nothing," Nix replied. "I choose truth over control, freedom over oppression." The battle erupted in a clash of energies, cold versus heat, darkness versus light. Devon found himself moving with intuition he didn't know he possessed, using the star fragment's power to counter the Sentinels' attacks while Nix engaged them directly, her armor's weapons flashing. But they were outnumbered and outgunned. For every drone they destroyed, 2 more appeared. For every attack they deflected, the commanders launched 3 more. Slowly, they were pushed back toward the tower's base. "The beacon," Nix shouted between attacks. "If we can activate it, my allies will come. We just need to hold out." Devon nodded, gathering his strength. "Then let's give them something they've never seen before." He reached deep into the star fragment's power, but this time, instead of fighting the cold, he embraced it. Understanding flooded through him. The Sentinel's power wasn't about cold at all, but about the space between energy states. With this realization, everything changed. Devon began moving energy the way the Sentinels did, but with the raw efficiency of the star fragment. The drones closest to him simply stopped, their power sources redirected. "Up the tower," he called to Nix. "I'll cover you." She sprinted for the tower's ladder while Devon held the commanders at bay. Each floor they climbed brought them closer to their goal, but also made them more vulnerable to the ships above. At the tower's top platform, Nyx pulled the beacon from its hiding place, a small pyramid that pulsed with the same galactic light as her eyes. But before she could activate it, a blast from one of the ships struck the tower. The entire structure groaned, tilting precariously. "It needs time to power up," she shouted over the wind. 30 seconds. Devon planted himself between Nyx and the approaching commanders, drawing on every bit of power the star fragment could provide. His entire body glowed now, stellar energy coursing through his veins. "Your species is not ready," the lead commander declared, raising its staff. "The balance must be maintained." "That's where you're wrong," Devon replied. "We've always been ready, you've just been too afraid to see it." The ensuing clash lit up the pre-dawn sky. Devon matched the commander's blow for blow, his natural affinity for the star fragment's power making up for his lack of training. Above them, the ships charged their main weapons, preparing to obliterate the tower entirely. 10 seconds, Nyx called out. The lead commander surged forward, its staff piercing Devon's energy shield. "You cannot comprehend the forces you meddle with, human." "Maybe not," Devon grunted, grabbing the staff. "But we'll learn, that's what humans do." With a massive effort, he channeled the star fragment's power directly into the commander's weapon. The staff overloaded, the feedback stunning all three commanders. "Now," Nyx slammed her hand down on the beacon. It erupted with light, sending a pillar of energy into the sky that parted the clouds. The Sentinel ships reeled back, their weapons powering down as new vessels emerged from hyperspace, sleeker craft glowing with familiar stellar energy. "The Stellar Liberation Front," Nyx explained, relief evident in her voice. "My allies, we've done it, Devon. The truth about humanity will finally be known." The commanders and their ships retreated as the new vessels took up defensive positions. But everyone knew this was just the beginning. The secret was out. Humanity had the potential to wield powers once thought reserved for advanced civilizations. "What happens now?" Devon asked as the sun finally rose over the forest. Nyx smiled, taking his hand. The circuits on their skin pulsed in harmony. Now humanity takes its first real steps into the galaxy, but you won't be alone." She squeezed his hand. "I'm staying if you'll have me. Earth will need teachers, guides who believe in humanity's potential rather than fear it." Devon looked out over his forest, forever changed by the events of the past day. The star fragment's power had become a part of him now, and he knew there would be others, humans across the planet discovering abilities they never knew they had. "Well," he said with a smile, "I suppose my job description as forest ranger just got a lot more interesting." Above them, the Liberation ships took up orbit as the first rays of sunlight painted the sky in brilliant colors. It was a new dawn, not just for Devon and Nyx, but for all of humanity. The stars were no longer just distant lights. They were a promise, a birthright too long denied. And somewhere in the galaxy, other Sentinels were about to learn that humanity had finally awakened to its true potential.